Muy buenas, ¿cómo estáis? Volvemos en otro capítulo de A Golpes o en otro episodio, como queráis llamar, con un batería que es, la mejor palabra para definirle es espectacular, porque cada vez que se sube en escenario, incluso cuando está tocando, es un espectáculo con los saltos que da y aparte por cómo toca. No voy a demorarlo más y aquí estamos tanto con Diego como siempre, como con Aric. Aric Improta, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Fine. Well, Diego, how are you?
I'm great today. I think I've got better audio than normally.
Yeah, you
Nice.
have you have to know, Aric, that Diego always have the worst connection, the worst internet connection of the world. But today it seems to be better, so fingers crossed.
I had to get my girlfriend's computer to get a better internet because she's connected through the wire.
Hey, that's my exact situation. My old place had the worst internet, so I'd always end up at my girlfriend, now fiance's, but girlfriend at the time's house because the internet connection sucks. So I get it. I get it.
Congratulations on your marriage. Anyway.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, congratulations. But well, today we'll talk about drumming, not about girlfriends because I'm single. So, Aric, the first thing, when I've been looking information about you, we used to talk with some young drummers, for example, Eloy Casagrande, Carlos Cruz, Jay Weinberg, Manu Reyes from Spain, or Dave Hook. All of them are from the new generation, except Tom Hunting from Exodus, for example. But I couldn't find your age. How old are you?
I'm 32. I don't know
32.
where that falls, somewhere in the middle, but yeah, I'm 32.
You are almost the youngest. I think that Eloy and Carlos are 31, so you are there in the third position of the ranking.
Okay. Nice.
So I would like to start a part of the age talking about your beginning on the drums. How did you start playing drums?
Well, my parents both work in the arts. So my dad is a designer, used to design for Disney, and he was the art director for the show Married to Children for a long time. And my mom taught theater. So when I was a kid, on the weekends they'd play in a cover band for fun, and they always had music around, and they always took me to films and concerts, and just kind of treated art as though it was, you know, like there's when it comes to like what's important, right? It's like it's family and then art and then everything else after that. So I feel like from a very young age they were very supportive, and exposed me to a lot of different types of art and music. And I got my first drum set when I was, I think, 3 years old, but at the time I just had a hard time paying attention. So I would play for like 30 seconds and then go skateboard or do something else. And it wasn't until about junior high, like 12, 13 years old, when I started playing music with friends, that I actually started to fall in love with the instrument. Because I love drums, but it really took collaborating with other people for me to want to dedicate, extreme amounts of time to the instrument. So I'd say once I started jamming with friends and I was like 12, I continued to do that through high school. And then when I got to the end of high school, beginning college, I was like 18, 19. I started practicing 5 hours a day because I had heard Kobe Bryant talk about what he was doing when he was young to practice. And I grew up in LA, so I was a huge Lakers fan. And then around that time is when I also started entering the Guitar Center drum offs because they still had these big drum competitions. And so while I was going to school to become a film major, those 5 years I competed in the drum off. And then the whole time I was trying to get out of college to tour, I didn't have any tours lined up with my band. And finally, the month I graduated in 2012, I got my first tour, and then I've been touring ever since then. So basically, May 2012 till now, I've been a full-time musician.
Mhm.
You mentioned the drum off. I think it was the moment I discovered you. I discovered you and JP Bouvet more or less at the same time. I think I was 16, maybe 15, 16 when I discovered you guys. How much did the drum off change your life?
A lot, but in unexpected ways. I feel like I had never been put in that kind of a pressure situation with music. You know, it had always been fun up to that point. And I love competition. I've competed doing gymnastics and diving and baseball and wrestling and football and every sport I could as a kid. And so, but I love individual sports because I don't have to rely on anybody. So it was fun because I got to see drummers and a level of drumming that I didn't know existed. Like I only played punk music. So when I was going to these drum offs and people were doing gospel chops and stuff, I literally didn't know what that was. I'd never seen anything like it. And so then for me, I realized that I couldn't compete with trying to match that. That just wasn't my style. It wasn't in my musical DNA. And I think anytime I tried, it was very obvious. So I think at that point is when I realized that the more I could pull from myself and be unique and stand out, the further I would get. So I learned that through the process. And then that kind of just got super emphasized once I got to the finals, because not only did I get to meet a lot of my favorite drummers, they were judges, and I never really expected to be here. Like I did it because I wanted it to make me better, but I didn't. At 19, again, I was just playing in punk bands. I saw people like Dave Weckl videos and Thomas Lang videos, and I thought like you had to be at that level to play at the finals of the drum off. So I practiced a lot, but I didn't think about how much that practice would pay off, I guess. And getting to the finals, you know, a lot of the people I looked up to had said really nice stuff to me after, and I ended up getting Meinl as my first endorsement, and I met Tama there, and it was a big like sort of launching point for me. But even more important than that, it was confirmation that doing something that's unique can take you that much further, because at least for me, because after that, the video, I mean, for whatever the term means, went viral, and at least at that point, and I'd never had anything do that. So again, it was just me understanding, at least from my path, that the more unique the work was that I was putting out, the better it was received. And I always like doing things on my own. I hate covering songs. I'll do it every once in a while, like if it's with good friends and I really love it. But in general, I think that's where it really changed my perspective, because I don't know, because I didn't like learning other people's stuff. I thought that was maybe a bad thing. And after doing the drum off, it kind of gave me like the confidence to know, like, you know, there's no right way to make art. And the further you can lean into it, I guess for me, the more exciting it was, especially because good stuff was coming from it.
Your technique playing drums is awesome, but I would say that the thing that makes you unique, if you are compared with the other drummers, is you jumping in the drums and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Diego and I play drums, and I can't imagine he or me doing that kind of jumping or playing while we are jumping. When did you think about that jumping playing drums was a good idea?
Oh, I just did it from the beginning. I don't know. I skateboarded as a kid. I still skate, and I just I felt like if I was going to play energetic music, I had to be giving as much energy as possible. Like for me, I always look at music and art as self-expression. I don't think of it as like, oh, I need to make sure that this is perfect, that this is as fast as this guy or anything. That doesn't matter to me. And I knew that at a very young age. And so if we were playing a song and I saw the guitarist jumping off an amp, I thought like, well, why can't I do that? That just seems like the most fun way to emphasize this part that's about to come in. So between, you know, being around that type of music and that type of energy and seeing bands like at the drive-in, that was like my favorite band as a kid. I remember at first being envious that I had to sit the whole time. Like, why did I pick the instrument where you don't get to jump off things? And then I just realized you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter if you've seen it before. And then on top of that, the fact that I had grown up skateboarding and watching Kobe Bryant do 360 dunks, it made me start to want to do stuff like 360s on the seat, or, you know, jumping up and meeting the tom with my foot. And it was always like a conscious effort that if I was going to do that, it needed to be at the right moment. You know, it needed to be before a heavy part, or it needed to be to pull off a certain technique. And I wanted it to become, you know, like almost like synonymous with everything that I do. So not just there for like an exciting moment, but like effortless, like the same way that you learn a fill, you know, and you want to be able to throw it whenever it's appropriate. Like I wanted to have all that stuff down so that if I was feeling it, like in a solo or live, it just came naturally. It wasn't something that I had to plan step by step. But yeah, I mean, I have footage of me when I was like 16 years old, like at my first shows doing it, just because it felt like, I don't know, it felt like what I wanted to do ever since I was a kid.
And how harmful has practice been? Because it must have been, right?
I've gotten hurt like twice, to be honest, in 16, 17 years, 20 years drumming actually. So yeah, it's not been too bad. I don't know. I mean, again, I think it's just like when you do it ever since you're a kid, you don't think about it. It would be a lot harder if I decided to try and do that stuff for the first time now. But I've always had a pretty decent kinesthetic sense because I did gymnastics as a kid and then skated and wakeboarded and everything else. So I've had a pretty decent sense of like, you know, knowing my own limitations physically, and I just haven't stopped doing it.
So when you are rehearsing for a tour,
Yeah.
when you are practicing the songs with the band, you try that kind of tricks when you start a song or in the middle of a song or whatever, or
whenever anytime I'm playing, doesn't matter if I'm alone with a band. It's the same as like, for me, it's like, you know, if you're playing a heavy song,
Yeah.
you want to hit hard in the intro.
Yeah.
You hit harder than you need to because it feels good. It's like that for me. It's I same thing with all the yelling. I do that when I'm by myself. It's how I feel if I'm gonna play something energetic. If anything, it's like hard for me to watch someone play energetic music and look calculated or look like they're trying to nail each hit. It's like I don't know. Again, I'm talking about self-expression. Like it's about giving yourself to that moment. For me, anyway. And again, there's no right way to make art. So to each his own. But I just always do it.
So have you reached the point of like, I'm very curious about this, of like muscle memory, where when you think about like playing, I don't know, Burn It Down by Fever.
Yeah.
You're like air drumming and you're like, oh, here comes the backflip, and you go like, here comes a backflip, or something like that.
Well, I think I mean, it's just if there's like a gap in the song that allows for it. I mean, not like I'm counting the seconds, but I know when a song stops that gives me enough time to jump. So it's the same as if you know you can throw a fill. Like I'm not going to do it in the middle of the chorus when I have to hold down the beat. But yeah, it's pretty second nature at this point. I mean, especially because for the last 4 years or up until quarantine, Fever was playing 200 shows a year at least. So when you play with people like Steven and Jason, who are always climbing and going into the crowd, I don't know, it just happens. It's like if, let's say with Night Versus, my instrumental band, you know, I jump maybe once or twice a show. The music is pretty full. Well, when you start to tour with a band where there's all these gaps and everybody's doing something exciting, I start doing it like 6-7 times a show and throwing 360s and backflips and everything else because it just feels appropriate to the art that's being created. I wouldn't do that if I was filling in for like Portishead or something like that because it's such, you know, it's kickback music. But with Burn It,
are these calculated? So like, you know which part of the song you're doing the backflip or the 360, or does it change every show?
It changes. Well, there's only 3 songs I have where I've got like a 30-second gap of not playing because I'm doing a lot of triggering on the pads and stuff when I'm not drumming. So I'm aware that, like, obviously I can't leave in the middle of a beat to go do it, but it does depend. I mean, sometimes, like in that band, if there was a moment where I was going to do it in the second song, sometimes my platform just got pulled out from under me, or I'm sideways on the edge of the stage because Jason moved it. So things change. And if anything, I feel like that is the most enjoyable aspect for me, of Fever, is the fact that the show is so different every day. So I don't really know, you know, there's some shows where stuff's going wrong, cymbals are falling over, and I have no opportunity to leave the kit. But I am aware, like, okay, there's 3 different times in the set where I've got a 30-second gap to go do whatever I want. And then whatever happens, happens. You know, I'll do a backflip some days. If there's a truss I can climb up and swing off of. I used to play this game where in those gaps, I would see how far from my kit I could get and try and make it back in time. And so far, I haven't ever come back late, but we've got a tour coming up this summer, so we'll see if I keep that winning streak going.
Have you lost practice? Like, are you afraid of losing practice?
Of what?
Are you afraid of losing practice? Like, after 2 years without doing backflips every single night?
Oh.
Or running away, like losing coordination, you know what I mean?
Well, we did, I did think about that because we did a Slipknot tour like 6 weeks ago, and that was the first tour in, I don't know, like at least a year and a half, right? But no, I mean, I still skate, and I still like, when I drum the way that I do on stage all the time. I break a lot of cymbals, unfortunately, but like, thank you to Meinl for taking I don't know, it just, I feel like if you're going to practice effectively, you should practice the same way you're going to perform. And the word perform is tricky because I think a lot of times it gets tied to like, this is what I do when people are watching. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in a sense, there are certain aspects when they're more extreme that seem a bit contrived because you feel like you're putting on a show. And I just never wanted that. Like, I want to do that everywhere that I go. I want to do it if let's say tonight is my last drumming session and then, you know, God forbid something terrible happens, I don't get to do it again. I don't want to think I sat down and just played a boring 3 hours and then like thought maybe this will be exciting when I'm on stage. So I don't know. I just try and do it all the time.
I remember you said that you break many cymbals when you're playing, but I remember I don't know if it was the only show you've played in Spain at Download Festival 2 or 3 years ago.
Show. It was so hot.
Me too. It was amazing, and I remember Jason took in a floor tom and breaking the head and putting the head inside the floor tom. So is it prepared? I mean, because it's a fucking floor tom or well, the head of the floor tom, you know?
I mean, he stabs it with the leg. That's how he gets his head through it. He doesn't do it every show, but I've seen him do it a couple times. But no, it's not like a breakaway tom. It just, I'm like this. With Fever, it's like, they've broken so much that as long as they buy me my new drum set, I don't care what they do, right? Like, I don't care. Like, okay, I'll try to explain this because drummers, a lot of times, they lose their mind when they see this equipment being broken or dove into, okay? No one is going to remember that tom if it just stays on my kit. So for me, I'm always like, whatever happens, happens. I would much rather you leave that show and have that to talk about than if all you said was like, man, Fever sounded perfect. Like, to me, it's like, my favorite concert of all time, it changed the way I look at music and everything, was at the drive-ins. It was in Australia. It wasn't Download, was it? I can't believe, Big Day Out. It was Big Day Out, and the set got cut early. But the first 3 songs they played, like, the energy was so crazy. All the shit was going wrong. Things were falling over, going out of tune. But like, I saw that energy and I thought, like, that's how I want to play every show. So I still treat it that way. Whereas even in those scenarios, you know, if my drums get broken that show, we'll find a way to get a new one. But I'd hate to play a show where all we're thinking about is being careful. And again, that changes per project. But for Fever, it just feels like the point is to give as much energy as possible. So that stuff happens pretty often, and I don't know what's going to happen. You know, I've had Jason accidentally get the mic cable caught on the drums while he was running and just take out half my kit, like cymbals, toms, everything just fall over. I've had both Jason and Steve standing on the drums at the same time. He's pulled the riser out for me multiple times, and I guess as far as preparation, it kind of just depends on what's available, right? Like, if there's wheels on the riser that day, then I know someone's probably going to move my kit while I'm on it. Whereas like those type of factors when you fly in for shows like down there to Spain, you don't really know. So we never actually know what's going to happen, but I just kind of expect everything to happen whenever I get on stage.
How cool, man. And how then do you approach the night versus show? Like it must be like night and day, right?
Yeah, very much so. Night versus is with Nick DePiero and Riley Herrera. I've been playing music with them since I was 12 years old. Through all of high school and college, we practiced 5 days a week. And that band is all about sonic challenges for us. It's the performance is trying to pull off whatever is the wildest thing we can do with our instruments, right? So Fever, it's physical. Night versus, it's way more musical. And so we have like a strict no tracks policy. Anything we do has to be played between the three of us, and we try and sound as expansive as possible with the limitation of just 3 people. And I think I needed that because I loved bands like At the Drive-In, and then I love bands like Opeth and Tool. And for a long time, I wanted to be able to do both, where you write these really complex pieces, but you jump around. And although that was natural for me, that's just not who Nick and Riley are. And I don't think it's fair to expect like what you want as an artist out of them. So Night versus became this, over time, once we became instrumental, it became this thing where we could challenge ourselves musically. And yeah, I mean, I still jump at Night versus shows, but no one's front flipping into my drum set. And at the same time, when I talk about those like openings to jump, is very few and far between, because in that band, I'm playing all of the synth stuff on pad while also playing drums. So it's a nice balance, because when I come home from 3 months of Fever, I get to focus and hone in on my chops and do Night versus. And it's like, it kind of just always keeps me from ever getting bored.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool. And then like, how different is the preparation between a Night versus tour versus a Fever tour for you?
Oh my God, way different. Night versus, I gotta run every song like 30 times, and I play in a lot of bands like between these. So like this year I filled in for Korn last minute. I played with Goldfinger. I was understudy for Trans-Siberian Orchestra. My brain doesn't lock onto songs for longer than like a month. So I can learn pretty fast when it comes to like getting new material. But if I haven't played a Night versus song in, 2 months, it doesn't matter if I played it 1,000 times. I have to practice it. I can't just sit. It's just, I don't know why. I wish it wasn't that way. Even with Fever, some of the songs are really simple, but if I haven't played it in 4 months, then I need to go through it. That being said, Night versus, it's like, I gotta memorize every detail of like, now I can change the patch on my pad while still playing this part so we can get to the next synth sound. Fever, I think more of the focus is on the transitions. It's not so much the songs, because the songs are pretty easy. Like you can just listen to them and remember what to play, but it's figuring out like the cool interludes, or like what drum solo I'm gonna write for the bridge of One of Us, where I have like a minute to go off. And I think definitely Fever is more about the transitions. Night versus is every detail, because I also, with that band, I like playing it note for note to the record. Every once in a while, we did a show in Germany, our last show before quarantine, and we had an encore, but we didn't have any music left, so we just improvised the last song. So Night versus, we have a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's like note for note. So I guess that's kind of the difference. And even in Fever, they'll let me just kind of improvise over certain parts. Like nobody has an issue with that. But Night versus, we all try and stay as tight as possible.
And when you're on stage playing with both bands, I guess that the reaction of the crowd is quite different because of the style of both bands. Which one of that shows do you enjoy more than the other band? I mean, I guess that it's different, but maybe you enjoy more with one band than with the other playing live,
Well, I think Night Versus is fun no matter who's in the audience because we've just always played in a room together. So it almost like it doesn't feel like any different. Like there can be 2,000 people or 200 people, and I just always feel like I'm doing something that is like more about the three of us than the people that are out there. Fever is kind of written in a way that is to purposefully get the audience engaged. So it's not like I don't enjoy small shows with Fever because we've had plenty of those as well. But when we're playing a festival, like we played Hellfest France last year, and it's like more than 20,000 people. And not last year, whenever.
Yeah.
It feels like last year, but it's probably like 3 years ago. And when you see, 20,000 people jumping at the same time, it's like the energy of the crowd's irreplaceable. I can't fake that, But the only thing with Night Versus that's a little weird is a lot of times in the States, more than in Europe, when we start the set, it's like the whole audience has their phones out because they're trying to like catch like the hard intro feel or whatever. I don't hate that. Like I kind of like the pressure that you can't mess up, but I do enjoy the fact that like when we go to Europe, it seems like people are more there to just enjoy what's happening, and it's not about like right off the bat before we even walk on stage trying to capture all those moments. I'm not saying I dislike it. I just love when people are fully engaged at a show. And Night Versus sets, that usually starts to happen more towards the middle, whereas Fever is like right off the bat, people are jumping off stuff with us.
It's interesting, that approach, because I think people in Europe tend to have their phones out too much.
Really?
So yeah. So I'm just so curious to see how it is in the States, because in Europe, to me at least, and well, especially in the mainstream, I work in the mainstream and at a label, and like the mainstream, you cannot see a show, like unless you're 1.8 meters tall, like you cannot see the show. It's all phones everywhere. So yeah.
There's this
I'm
one
a huge complainer.
Yeah, we played right next to Berkeley, and so we knew there was going to be a bunch of musicians, and it was on an instrumental tour. It was with Intervals and Jason Richardson and Luke Holland and Nick Johnston. And I just remember, like, I purposefully put the hardest Night Versus song first because I just want to start off right away, like, 100 miles per hour. And I remember sitting down and just seeing like 50 phones right away, just like the lights weren't even on, and I just saw the lights from the phones like ready to record. And I just remember like that was one of those, it was an awesome show, and I'm not like trying to hate on that by any means, but it's just such a different vibe than when you see an audience that's just ready to like dance or headbang or whatever else. And I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking that Berkeley show. Not every show in the U.S. was like that, for the record, but I do feel like Night Versus. When I think of Night Versus shows in Europe, the last run we did was one of the most incredible set of shows I've ever gotten to play. We sold out London. It wasn't a huge room or anything, but like the audience was just like vibing the whole night. And when we played Germany and Amsterdam, we did Complexity. Was it Complexity? Something like that. One of the festivals. It was like the audience was just there to enjoy art. There wasn't a lot of phones, and it was so refreshing. It was like the perfect way to go out before a year and a half of no shows. So I don't know. I guess that's why I'm associating it with that.
How great! How great! I wanted to talk about. You mentioned earlier what I feel like is a huge passion for Opeth, because I see you constantly, when you paint, you constantly post with Opeth songs.
Oh yeah.
What does Opeth mean to you? How influential have they been to you?
Oh, they're huge. I always find it incredibly fascinating when a band can master the dichotomy of having a really, really heavy side and a really mellow side. Deftones is great at that. But Opeth, and that Deftones is also one of my favorite bands, but for me, Opeth is like this weird middle where it does all of the prog stuff I'd ever want to hear. If I need mellow music, yeah, I can listen to anything off of Damnation. When it comes to heavy, obviously they came from like a death metal background and grew into this like almost unclassifiable entity, once they get through like Blackwater Park to Watershed. And then it took me a second to get used to their prog 70s left turn, but I love that as well. And I just think they have music for almost every mood, and they do it so well, and they never run out of ideas. Like, so many bands return to the same things that they know work really well. And I'm not saying that Opeth doesn't have repeating themes, but I'm always so fascinated with the fact that every time they put out a record, I hear like 6 or 7 things that they haven't done before, and they're still doing it with the instruments. It's not like Opeth decided like, okay, we're going to add 60 tracks and we're also going to add electronic music, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just mean their ability to work within their limitations and always create something new is awesome to me. Nick, my guitarist, and I have seen like 7 of their shows, and I remember Nick's dad taking us to an Opeth show when we were like 13 years old or something. So I don't know, there's just something about that band. They also write the best music for fall. Like anything from like October, November time, there's no band that like maybe a little bit of goth music can fill that gap. But for me, like, you know, Damnation, songs like Harvest, all that stuff, just like, it's like the only music I have that matches that mood for me.
That's because of the climate. They're Swedish.
I know. Sweden has like some of the best bands in the world. I swear to God, there's something going on over there that's like just unbelievable.
It's because it's so cold and it's so dark in winter that they spend so much time inside practicing and rehearsing. You know, why do we not have any big bands in Spain? Because we're always out drinking beer. It's always nice.
Yeah, maybe.
That's funny.
And do you know do you have a relation with some of or relationship with some of the guys from Opeth? Do you know them?
No, I'm actually just a fan, to be honest. I
have to say that if you want to know the best player, Martin, he lives here in Spain, very close to. I mean, I've been working for him for his other band, White Stones, which is a death metal band. It's similar to the last. It's like a mix of Opeth. Different times, but he lives here and he's a very cool guy, Martin, and he's from Uruguay. So that's the reason, because when I knew him in Germany in some interview, he told me, come to dinner because I want to speak Spanish today.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's incredible. I love his work.
If you sometime are in the same festival or whatever, you have to know them. They are very cool guys.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, and you are confirmed to play here in Spain next summer at Mad Cool Festival.
Yeah, I know. I'm stoked. And literally the next day, my guitarist is getting married, so I'm playing that show and then flying to California within like 24 hours.
Really?
Yeah, but I'm excited. I love Spain. We Download Festival was that show that you were at. That was the end of a like 2-month run for us, and it was the wildest run because we were driving in a van. Well, it was like a bus van. It wasn't fully a bus. I don't know what it was. Something in between.
Yeah.
And we were trying to make these insane dates. So we would literally get off stage or get out of the van sometimes, and within 3 minutes be setting our gear up, and we play. And sometimes it'd be in front of like 20,000 people, and then we literally get all our stuff off stage, get back in the van, and go to the next festival. And it was like 2 months of that. So it was wild because we wouldn't know what to expect. You just walk out on stage within 5 minutes after driving for 24 hours straight, play this massive crowd, and then get back in the van. And Spain was the last show, and that ended up being where I met and hung out with Justin Chancellor from Tool, and we ended up becoming friends. And because we had done a couple festivals, and he had seen Fever, but Spain, he invited us to hang side stage, and then I talked to him and his wife after the show, and after that we exchanged numbers and ended up writing for his project Empty Void with him and Glocka that through quarantine. And then I did a video with him like a few months ago, and all of that happened because of the time we spent in Spain. So that show's like very, very memorable to me. And just the audience was so into it. The weather was perfect. It's super hot, but like, yeah, I don't know. It felt like it felt like we got like almost to like a spiritual level with the music that day. It was cool.
So the next day after the show, you have to fly to the States. But later, will you continue the tour, or is the end of the tour in Spain?
No, I got to come back like the next day.
Okay.
I end up having to do this a lot. For real, because I'm in 2 bands. So like, I remember, actually, but the show the next day is Russia, and I don't know what's happening with that. So
Yep.
I might be home for a little bit. I have no idea. But I remember the first time I went to Japan with Fever was in the middle of that tour I was telling you about with Night Verses, that was with Intervals and Jason Richardson, Nick Johnston. And so we were going through Texas. Was it that tour? No, it was a different one. But I was on a Night Versus tour, sorry. And we were about to go into Oklahoma. I had to drive from Oklahoma to Texas to get to an airport. I flew to Japan. I played one show, flew back to Texas the same day, and kept doing the Night Versus tour. And there was another time when I had to fly from New York to play a show in Vegas with Fever, back to New York, played Canada, and then drove home from Canada all the way to California. So it's like, it just ends up happening that way. It is, I don't know, it's intense at times, but I don't know what other time in my life I'm going to get to play in these bands. So it just seems like it's worth it.
Dude, how cool. And you mentioning your work with Justin Chancellor, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, when you were mentioning your influences and everything, you mentioned specifically Opeth and Tool. So I'm assuming that you're a huge Tool fan as well. And I wanted to ask you about Justin, but you came straight into the topic. How significant has it been for you to work with him?
You know, it was incredible. I feel like he's such a cool personality that it kind of like made it a lot easier. You know, he's very down to earth. He's really funny. We talked about like Bruce Lee films and I don't know, he makes it a lot more of a inviting collaboration than it could, you know, if he could have been intense if he wanted to be, but his personality is just so kick back and open, and his approach is so unique that it was really fun for me, because it's like I love working with people and bringing what I think is the best out of them, like what I would want to hear as a fan, but then putting it in a setting that's different than their normal project. And he was totally open to it. But I will say, when I was helping film, like, so I built this mirror room, and that's what we wrote the piece in. And he was cool. I had my good friend Kevin and his team at Mix One help me. And I kind of like co-directed it, because when I wasn't playing, I was behind the camera. And the moments where I was behind the camera directing and I was seeing him through the viewfinder, that was when it would hit me. Like, I'd be like, damn, how did we end up here? And in that moment, you know, I'd have like these little glimpses of like remembering how much of a fan I am of Tool. But usually, you know, these people are human beings. In a professional setting, when I go to write with someone, like, as much as I am a fan, I can focus and be there and be on a level where I'm not thinking about that. But it's more like when I step away and I look at it, I'm very proud, and I think of what 12-year-old me would think is that this is unbelievable and it would never happen, you know? So I guess maybe that's, like, I've gotten to work with a lot of people that I grew up being very fond of their work or influenced by it. You know, Fever works a lot with Travis Barker, and he was one of the first drummers that I had ever been influenced by as a kid. And, you know, I don't know, I've gotten to work in a lot of scenarios where it's with people like that. And I just think because it took me so long to get to where I'm at. I mean, like, I've been trying to do festivals like this since I was 18, and it didn't happen till 28. So it was like 10 years of full-time working that now that I'm here, it doesn't feel like there's no imposter syndrome. I don't feel like, oh my God, how did I get here? It's like, I'm so aware of the hundreds and thousands of hours it took to get to this place where I'm touring this much and meeting these people, and I'm this fluid with my instrument and everything else. So I don't know, it hits me more after. Sorry, that was a long answer, but hopefully that answered it.
No, it's normal. I mean, as a fan, you need to have a long answer. Like, if you would have had a short answer, like, yeah, it was cool, I would say fan.
And also, you've said that you've worked a lot to become the musician and where you are now. But as a drummer, how many hours do you practice per day?
So when I was 18, I started practicing 5 hours a day, and I did that as close as I could to that. Obviously, I had some days where I had like finals and stuff because I was going to college for film, but I did that for all of college. So 2000, end of 2007 into 2012, and then I toured full time, but I would still do that when I was home for about the first 3 years, and then, you know, I say this seriously, meaning it, like, unfortunately, you know, when you get all of these opportunities, you now have to spend all these hours editing. And because I wanted to integrate visual art, illustrating, and I'm very thankful for that. But I do miss how much you can progress when you're practicing 5 hours a day every day. That being said, when I'm home right now, like, I would say I'm practicing between 2 to 5 a day. I just used to be very like, it's got to be 5 no matter what. But all that to be said, I love creating way more than I do, you know, drilling patterns. So, like, if I can spend 5 hours writing music with night verses or 5 hours working on paradiddles with my feet, I'd much rather be writing music with night verses. You know, it's just like, as much as I love video editing and everything else, and, you know, I'd much rather be drumming than that. So when that stuff takes over, that's the only thing that's kind of limited my time. But for sure, it was the rule was 5 hours a day for all of college and the first half of my, like, touring or professional career.
Oh, cool, man. And then talking about like your other ambitions, one of your drumming ambitions that struck me, I think you struck the entire drum community, was when you released the 40-minute. Is it, can I call it track or album? Because I know on Spotify it's divided into different sections, but how'd you call it, and how did that come up?
This is an interesting question. I had played a drum festival in South Korea in 2016 with Jojo Mayer and D'Anthony Parks. And in those scenarios, I just like to pick their brain because they've seen so much more than me. They have an insight that is going to be completely different than mine. And I just feel like there's something to learn from people like that. You know, they've seen different sides of the industry, everything else. And I remember I spent a lot of time hanging with D'Anthony, probably like 2 full days. But I had like a half day with Jojo Mayer, and I asked him a lot of questions. And he was talking about how music used to be, or how it used to feel to him. And one of the things he mentioned is he was saying how when Terry Bozzio first did 20-minute solos, it was just like insane. He's like, it was so extreme and radical, and we'd never seen anything like that. So I remember in 2016, I was like, all right, if he did 20 minutes, I got to do a 40-minute solo. Like, I didn't say that to Jojo Mayer. It wasn't like some big exclamation, but at the time, I did that in my head, and I still do that to this day. Like, if somebody says something that's really intriguing to me, and it seems like they don't ever think that's going to be beat the way that they say it, I like to prove that wrong to myself. And I'm not proving anything wrong to Jojo Mayer, obviously. That guy is incredible. But the way he talked about it and the way that somebody at his level was fascinated with that concept, I was like, I want to be able to do that for somebody that's coming up now, you know, because he seemed so amazed by it. And at the same time, I met with Chris Brewer at, like, this is probably a couple months later at NAMM. I met with Chris Brewer, one of the main guys at Minor Cymbals, and we had talked, and he had brought up possibly doing Minor Drum Fest. And I was like, let's do it. And I'd only done solos up to this point in these events. And the solo for my set for South Korea was only 15 minutes. And then before that, there was the drum off, which was 5 minutes. So, like, for me, I just felt like that's what I do in these scenarios. But with Mino's thing, I had a 40-minute set. So I was like, perfect. This will be my chance to do this 40-minute solo that I had, like, kind of imagined, you know? And the lineup to that festival was fucking insane. It was like Chris Coleman, Benny Greb opened, Alex Rudinger was playing, Luke Holm was playing, Annika Nils was playing. It was a great lineup. And especially with people like Chris Coleman and Benny Greb on the bill, I had to ask myself, I'm like, all right, what am I going to bring to this that they won't? Because like I said in the drum off scenario, it's like if I'm doing Chris Coleman or Benny Greb impersonations, there's no point. Like it's not going to work out for me. And, you know, there's Alex and Luke who are incredible at metal, and they're very technical. And not that that's the only thing they do, but you know what I mean? Like, metal is covered at that festival. Yeah. You don't need another guy playing metal. And so I thought, like, well, what do I have that these people don't? And I was like, I've got 5 months. I didn't have much to do in that 5 months as far as like I had work, but I was home. So I knew I had the time to prepare something. So I thought if I prepare every note of this thing for 5 months, then it'll be at the level to where I'm extremely proud to play amongst these people. And I'm going to have no sense of like, you know, like, oh my gosh, I'm following Benny Greb, or oh, next is Paul. You know what I mean? Like, if I prepare for 5 months, I can put together something that's going to be unique. So I spent 5 months on it. I spent the first 3.5 months writing it, note for note, and then
writing it like transcribing, or
no, it's all memorizing.
Okay.
But I don't ever transcribe anything.
Okay.
I mean I can tab stuff like for if I need to write for night verses, but I like just locking everything in my head so that I have no fear when I get on stage, you know? And so I learned it or wrote it, and then I played it 100 times all the way through before leaving for Germany to do that festival. And at the time, my Aunt Kathy, who was a very unique individual, she had passed away. And so she had passed away from cancer. And the thing that was really unique about her was she's very different from my entire family, but she was never apologetic about it. She was very artistic and politically was different than all of my mom's side of the family, but was so confident in who she was and always talked to me about art when I was a kid. And so I felt like it was a good analogy for me going into this scenario where it's like, I know I don't play like these other people, but that doesn't have to hinder my confidence or my approach or change the way I go about things. So a lot of those pieces in there were focused on things deeper than just drumming. You know, I had parts that were thinking about my aunt. At one point in that, I developed permanent ringing in my ears, which is what it is. It happens to a lot of drummers. So I have like an entire 20 minutes where there's like a buzzing. I put like a low frequency that I was trying to match the ringing in my ears that goes throughout the whole thing. I had a lot of quotes that kind of inspired me to continue to do this, because when you're 10 minutes into a 40-minute solo, when you're writing it, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to do another 30 minutes? And so I had just these little like sound bites of people like Brian Eno that their musical perspective had really inspired and propelled me throughout the years. And I made this piece as kind of like a time capsule of my life at that point. Went to Germany, performed it. It was a lot of fun. Literally the next day, like we're talking about, I had to fly into Inglewood, California to play Fever's first show out of the back of a U-Haul truck at Randy Donuts. So the day after that festival was the first Fever show. And then all the footage got corrupted from that festival. So while I was recording Night Versus' last full-length record, Chris from Mino hit me up and was like, hey, would you mind re-recording the entire 40-minute piece at Mino Studios? And I was so grateful that they were willing to, you know, fund this project. They believed in the art so much, because they could have been like, you know, we've got enough footage, we can chop up 40 minutes and just use the usable parts. But they were very insistent on us getting the full piece, and I was really like impressed by their conviction with that, you know, like I thought that was awesome of them. So
they do like not to over compliment Mino or anything, but it's what they do. They bet on art. I think that's their value added towards other companies. Not to diss anyone, but
no. And yeah, there's other companies that are all about it, but Mino has been that way. So we're actually working on a project right now that furthers your point. That'll be out, I'm sure, at some point soon. But anyways, so then I went to the studio with Night Versus. Halfway through, when I finished tracks, I had to run home or fly home and practice, relearn the 40-minute solo because that stuff just goes out my head. And then I flew to Tennessee and recorded the video version, and then I released it. And after that, I had so many requests to get like an audio version that's why I put out the Spotify thing, and I divided it into tracks because I figured it was an album at that point. You know, there were like different chapters and things that I thought about when I was writing them and different meanings. So that's why it got divided up. But yeah, it was started from that little comment Jojo Mayer made and then moved to where it is now.
So we call it an album, right?
Yeah.
And is the hardest thing you've played ever on the drums?
Yeah, I'll say so. I don't, you know, like I kind of also did it for that reason. I thought if I can do 40 minutes by myself, then any scenario I have after this is not going to be harder than that. I wouldn't think, you know. That being said, I want to do more of those. I've just been busy. Like I'd love to do one of those every like 3 years for as long as I'm, you know, on Earth. But it just depends on my schedule, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, Aric, I must ask, you mentioned that you're working on another project, and I don't want you to feel any compromise or anything, but what's the next big thing you're going to show us? Because I'm expectant.
Oh, I mean, the thing with Meinl is not, it's not a performance thing, but it's just them valuing art in an interesting way. I am working really, really, really hard on new night verses, and we have about 2.5 albums worth of material. So we're kind of trying to figure out how that's going to be released. We're going to do a Patreon so that we can start putting out stuff more frequently, but we're still working with our label. So it's like trying to figure out what's going to be the first set of songs. Is there going to be a themed album that's all mellow stuff? So I've got that coming. Fever's working on a new record right now. And then for myself, I've got the blueprints for my next solo. And I think it's going to be performed. Part of it will be performed at the end of this year, like November. And then I think the full thing is going to be done early next year, I believe. I'm trying to figure it out because I'm talking to a couple companies I'm working with to see like what's going to be the best setting to present it in. But I really want to do something that feels like maybe 20 minutes, not 40, but something that feels like an updated version of that album, because I've been through a lot in my life and I've had new things that have inspired me, and I'm always working on getting better. Like the chops that I'm going to use in the next one are not the same as the one that was in, or the same as the stuff that I used in Blur Lights in the video drum. And so I don't know, it's kind of like I go through these really, really intense phases where I have a 1.5 years of writing and then 2 years of performing. And then I go back into this hibernation of like a 1.5 years of writing. And it's almost like everything I do works at the same time, right? So right now I've been in this writing phase, and I would imagine once all this stuff comes out, I'm going to go through another 2 years of playing it and promoting it everywhere, and then back into this process again.
Let's see. We'll be watching you on Instagram and all the social media to see what's next with you. Well, Aric, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great talk with you. For the people, you have to know that you can follow him on the social media at Aric Improta, but also with his Illustrator account, which is at Hexwave. Hex wave. So
HEX wave. I like
yeah.
it.
So well, Aric, thank you very much again. Hope to see you and meet you face to face in Madrid at Mad Cool Festival. I will talk with Jake and all the team, and also with Jason, because I knew him 2 years ago when during the pandemic he was taking over our Instagram account.
Nice.
So I hope to see you there and meet you face to face and see how many cymbals can you break in a concert.
Hey, yeah, feel free to hit me up on email and message, whatever, or Jake. I'd love to hang out once we actually get to Madrid. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so Diego, a last message for
Aric,
Aric.
I just want to say, like, from the bottom of my heart, this has been the best show we've done. I mean, I really felt your message, and I think it was fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys. You guys are awesome. And again, sorry, I know I came on a little bit.
Don't worry about that.
There's an expression in Spanish, you can learn it, which is nunca es tarde. It's never too late. Si la dicha es buena, if the substance is good.
There we go. I totally agree with that. And I want to say part of that is because you guys ask good questions. People don't do that enough. I get interviewed fairly often in Fever, and a lot of times they ask the same 3 questions. So I really want to show gratitude over the fact that you guys really thought out what you're asking and made this fun for me as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Aric.
Thank you very much. It's good for us to listen that kind of comments about our questions or our work. So thank you very much, and congratulations, and thank you for your work playing drums, because it's fucking amazing. I mean, I enjoy a lot watching you playing. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you guys so much. Feel free to hit me up whenever, honestly.
Perfect.
Okay.
I'll hit you on Instagram. So later I will message you.
Okay.
So
Take care, guys.
Thank you very much, Aric, and see you next time.
Awesome.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Qué majo ha sido Aric. Que nos reconozca nuestro trabajo está genial, la verdad. Y nada, es un placer echarle un ojo a Aric porque toca la batería espectacular. O sea, es un show en todo su esplendor. Y nada, nos vemos en el próximo capítulo de A Golpes y esperemos que os haya gustado este. Así que nada, ya sabéis que en Power Magazine tenéis los artículos de esto, que podéis seguirnos en Twitch, que podéis aquí tanto en Twitch como en Spotify escucharnos y que siempre sois bienvenidos. Así que nada, hasta la próxima. Adiós, adiós.